Hi, I'm Nikki Daniels, and I am the Program Director for the College of Adult and Professional Studies programs in Organizational Leadership and also Healthcare Leadership. I have the privilege also of teaching in a variety of our CAPS-JS programs, as well as in the Leadership minor in CAS, the first course, Leadership 1. I spend a lot of my time working with faculty here, also as the Assistant Dean of the Business and Leadership programs. Well, the idea of what constitutes classroom discussion, or facilitating that discussion, really begs the question, are we talking face-to-face or online? Obviously, some of the ideas are transferable between the two, but for purposes of this video, I'm really thinking about the face-to-face classroom. When I think about discussion, I think about interchange, I think about exchange, I think about the interaction that happens between the individuals in the room, and that can be between the students themselves or from the student to the instructor or instructor to the student. And even as I've been thinking about this question further, it's like what goes on inside of a person, whether that's me as the instructor or the student themselves. It's that ability to generate the ideas and think about the ideas and get to that point of being willing to share those ideas as well. And sometimes in the classroom, that becomes the most exciting part of what's constituting the discussion, moving from that point of, I think I know what I know, to, oh, let me tell you what I think I'm discovering for myself. Again, it goes back to that idea of engagement, the willingness to talk, the willingness to share ideas, the willingness to let me tell you what I know. It's that reality of wrestling, with what is being discussed. But I think when I think about the discussion, I'm thinking about looking at how high order thinking is occurring within an individual. And it really starts, I kind of think, the premise, the beginning starting point is that place of agreement or disagreement, or looking at how questions are formatted from an individual, either from their own mind or as they respond to questions that are coming from other people, moving to that place of analysis and integration, where all of a sudden it isn't just this ambiguous word formatting that's going on out here, but it's all of a sudden I find a point of impact for me personally. When I start seeing students grab onto what's happening and then starting to want to talk about it, then that point of analysis and integration gets exciting. I also get excited with feedback and with discussion when I realize that people aren't just regurgitating anymore what they think they know or what they've read up to that point, but they're finding that point of application. And it's like that moment, that teachable moment bell goes off, and sometimes that goes off for the student before that goes off for me. I generally set up a class where I'm always encouraging people to look for those aha moments, and people who take us seriously in that, who are really coming for that academic discovery journey, are pretty willing to share, guess what I just realized, or guess what I just recognized. And if there's any kind of competition going on in the class, sometimes that will motivate, and encourage somebody else to think, oh, well, if you discovered that, why can't I discover that too? And again, it goes across the board with, maybe it's not going to be the same moment for everybody, but I have really found that the challenge between the students gets to be more exciting sometimes than what I can offer them as the instructor, even kind of tantalizing them with kind of that carrot to get them going. Obviously, at first when I thought about the goals, it's like, well, of course, I want active learning. I want them to be engaged. I want them to interplay and interface with each other. I want that active learning process, but then I've realized along the way, I don't just want a lot of, puppets that I'm manipulating the strings for, or even a lot of sheep who are willing to just play along with whatever game I throw out at them. They're going to, be part of that. So it becomes that active learning process that really moves them to our goals in education of transformation. I am looking for those points of transformation in their experience, transformation in their outcomes, that ability to look for understanding, for some meaning, for some application that gives them the ability to articulate, their perspectives, where they actually have that ownership and buy-in. It is, what do you know? What do you really know that you know? What didn't I know when I came in? What can I tell you that I know right now? Those are a couple of goals that come to more of an underlying goal that is one of trust and respect. And when I talk about trust and respect in the classroom, I talk about that, first of all, for themselves. I want them to learn, I want each person in the room to learn to trust themselves, to be able to own the kind of ideas they're thinking and trust themselves with the outcomes they're coming with those ideas, to have that confidence, that sense of assurance for themselves. But then I'm looking for that trust and respect within, amongst each other. It is that idea of even when we're talking about discussion and some of the goals of waiting for your turn, but building upon, it's always that active listening thing again. Am I really paying attention to what you're saying so that I can build upon, rather than how many times in a class have you been and somebody goes, well, I just said that, or okay, ditto, I just heard that before. So it's, it's keeping that challenge high of build upon what you've heard before that. And then trusting the process as well. Do they trust their own academic journey process, what their sense of the self process that they have, but then also what happens within the classroom or within their interchanges with each other. Another goal that I have realized, even as I've been thinking about the questions for this interview, is I've really been influenced years ago by Edgar Schein's writings and his understanding of the difference between discussion and dialogue. And I realized that most people, when they come to a class, particularly in our CAPS GS courses, because those are self-directed learning, a little bit more than in our CAS courses, but always my goal there too is to get people engaged in discussion. But when you're talking about discussion, and even the way Schein describes it, it's where that ability to state what I know, to state my opinion, state my perspective, state my conviction. And I realized that what happens in the classroom, we really want to move beyond that ability to state what is, to move to that point of dialogue where we have this stream of meaning going on that allows for that process of new ideas, new thoughts, new ideologies, to that point of transformation, to that point of, I never thought about that before, but I might try that along the way, to get beyond where they already are. So it does come down to, the kind of four words that underlie that are understanding, to the point of internalizing, to the point of application, and then to that point of reflection. Do I know what I know? Do I agree with what I know? Am I going to stay here? Do I want to think beyond? Will I strategize or change trajectories along the way? There's a few different prompts. Obviously, the first one that comes to all of our minds, and so much of what I'm sharing is not new to anyone out there, the reality is questions. But I've learned that how important it is to formulate the right question in order to get the discussion. So it isn't just, what do you think, or do you agree with that? While those might be prompting kind of questions, it gets below that, to help unwrap and unpack the dialogue or the discussion that's already happening. So it may be questions even like, what is new information for you, or what is clarified, or what is reinforced, but rather than just allowing the student to stop at just identification of what that is, to get below that and say, okay, explain that, or can you be more specific? What's some of the rationale there for you? Can you describe what it is that you're thinking? What is your reaction? Do you agree? Do you disagree? You need to take a stance here, in the reality of just kind of floating through life. I think in our classrooms, at least for me as the instructor, I feel like one of the things that I've been that's expected from me is to help people identify and to solidify where they're coming from. So do you own this? I ask that question a lot. Do you own this? Or is this your thought? Is this your understanding? Or is this something that you have been fed and you've bought into just because it's easier, or you're afraid to ask the question, you're maybe afraid to take another stand? Many times when I ask that question, I don't even have to say anything for another half hour or more, because people, buy into that. Some people have never been challenged with that, depending upon the age or maybe the culture that they're coming from. I hear from students later sometimes, and this just happened last week, where a student from another culture emailed me the next day and said, I so appreciated, especially when we were talking about the topic of conflict management, the need to question. And yet she said, in my culture, if I do that with my elders, that looks like disrespect. And yet she said, I realized for the first time that it's not unusual for me to feel that, though. So it's giving freedom to our students to just really become who God's created them to become, and then figure out how to live within their realms and their spheres of influence along the way. A lot of times in that asking of questions, I will give... I'm known for putting things on a continuum, kind of that idea of polar opposites, and constantly challenging the individuals back, and me too. I'm always saying, when I challenge you, I'm challenging me. On this continuum of options, where do you place yourself? Is that where you want to be? Are you satisfied with that? What would you have to do to move one way or another? And sometimes that becomes an assignment. Sometimes that is personal for them. Sometimes that's a group kind of assignment. And sometimes it's just a question that's thrown out, because I will throw that question out, quite often. But it gives people, I think, that ability to think beyond, to see beyond, and maybe to realize beyond the box that I'm in, there might be other boxes that I might like to, investigate, or to explore. So questions are one way, to prompt discussion. I think another way to prompt discussion is the student comments, and this requires not only active listening on the part of the instructor or of the students, but that falls back on the instructor. I come home sometimes from class, whether it's that hour and 15-minute CAS class or the 4-hour CAPS-GS course, and I'm exhausted. And I realize it's because of being that person that is trying to listen so hard to find the connections, the points of, oh, you said this, what do you think about that? No, you guys are saying the same thing. When disagreements, rise. This happened last Tuesday night in class, where all of a sudden I realized there was a pretty heated discussion going on, but they were saying the same thing, but they were saying it very differently. And when I finally found the two words that were there that they were utilizing the same, all of a sudden our whole, we just changed courses with where we were going. So really bouncing, it's like that old idea, that game kids used to play, with keeping the balloon in the air or the ball in the air. I think students' feedback and students' comments really do foster, discussion, effective discussion prompts. Activities, and that might be simulations or icebreakers, games, role-playing, also foster and prompt discussion, maybe in ways haven't thought about, may seem very elementary, and then all of a sudden it's like, oh, that does play into what today's all about. I think any kind of media clips prompt discussion, whether that's a video clip or a TV clip or a YouTube clip, but something it might even be a graphic that's just put up there to say, look at this, think about this, what does this remind you of, kind of a thing. And I also am one that uses handouts. Many times those handouts will be something that I've generated, and it might come out of the reading that they've already done, but creating some sort of a matrix or just another visual to say, this is what you were reading about. Oh, look how simple it looks here versus what it looked like before. And then I'll always ask for somebody to make it pretty for me, because I'm not very good at that. But those are, that idea of setting the stage to generate the thinking, out of a variety of ways. I think that for me, I am the facilitator when I come in the classroom. And I generally tell every class that my role as the instructor is to facilitate this process, this learning process, around a topic of discussion. Now, it might be particular for that class, or it might be particular to the bigger program, depending upon where we're at, if it's a standalone class or if it's within a program. But I don't just stop at that reality that I'm the facilitating. My facilitation is built upon my knowledge, my acquired knowledge of what this subject is about, or what my experience is, or what my expertise is there. But to look at my role as facilitator. But I've also realized, even thinking about this interview process, but as I think about my teaching, is I recognize that I approach the classroom through a lens of leadership. And I approach the classroom the same way I approach any team, that I'm leading. And in that reality, I recognize that as leader, I teach. And again, those aren't my own thoughts. That comes from Noel Tishy, his book, Leadership Engine, his philosophies and his research. But he says that any time that we lead, we teach. Well, when I'm walking into a classroom and I'm facilitating that classroom, I'm walking in then as the leader, but through a lens of teaching as well. And I have used his 4 elements. He says that when we lead, we teach, and we teach 4 things. We teach ideas, we teach values, we teach energy, and we teach edge. And what I've realized for me in the classroom, if I really take that seriously, that I'm teaching ideas, that's the what. That's the topic, that's the broader research, that's the intended outcome. The why through the values. Those will be the values of the program, the values of the institution, the values that I bring personally to the topic or through who I am, interplayed and interfaced upon the individuals that are sitting in the room as the students as well. But so teaching the ideas and the values then creates kind of the how, through energy. I recognize, I know how I respond to an instructor or a leader or facilitator walking in. If they walk in with enthusiasm and interest and creating excitement, I am much more willing to respond to them. And so for me as the instructor, I have to do that with energy. If I'm not interested, why should they be interested? If I throw out that, well, you can do with this what you want, I've lost them, so the reality of saying, here's what we're doing, here's why we're doing, here's the bigger picture, here's why I'm excited about it, here's the passion, here's the energy, the enthusiasm, because one of our roles as a leader or even as an instructor teacher is to inspire and to generate hope. We know through leadership studies even that followers are looking for leaders who can generate hope. And I think that's part of what we do. They're looking for leaders who can provide direction. That's what we do in the classroom as well. And I think that comes under that umbrella of energy. And then that edge, it is that ability to be able to draw a line in the sand. What are our convictions? Where can I stand strong? The yes, the no, the right, the wrong, kind of an idea. And I think as instructors in the classroom, for me, when I think about my role in facilitating that, I'm always coming back to what do you know now? What do you know now that you didn't know before? What will you do differently because of what you know now? Or will you do anything differently? I think that helps them understand that edge piece as well, and I think I model that. And then I also, with this in my role of facilitating discussion, comes back to Patrick Lencioni has written a book called 3 Signs of a Miserable Job. If you haven't read it, read it. It's incredible. But when I read the book, I immediately thought back to the classroom because he said that 3 signs of a miserable job are immeasurement, irrelevance, and anonymity. Well, think about the student in the classroom. If they feel anonymous, if they feel like they're not seen, that they're invisible, are they going to engage? They're not going to engage in any kind of discussion we're doing in the classroom. They're not going to engage in the assignments that are given. You may or may not hear from them along the way. So how do I foster the sense that they don't feel anonymous, and that it comes to the next one of immeasurement. Students are always looking for feedback. Well, I can help generate, I think, the classroom discussion, the feedback discussion time through what I do in and out of the classroom. I look them in the eye. I answer their questions with either answers or questions. I respond to them promptly via, if it's an email or a phone call kind of a thing. I turn their papers back on time with not just a grade on them, but with rationale, and that's what they're looking for. If I give them that kind of attention outside of the classroom, they're going to give us all kinds of attention in the classroom. And then that idea of relevance, irrelevance, if that's the third thing that Lencioni identified as a miserable job. In the classroom, irrelevance looks like, can we demonstrate importance? Can we demonstrate application? Can we demonstrate where does this class fit within a bigger picture? Sometimes I'll have to bring people back to, you may not understand this particular assignment, this particular class right now, this particular week of this class, but there is a bigger picture there. Hang with me. So I think, again, it's that constant communication of looking beyond even the questions they're asking sometimes and maybe giving them more information than they want to know, but sooner or later they'll recognize maybe why. What you're about to see is the class ORGL 101, Leadership for the 21st Century. Leadership for the 21st Century is a class, it's a gen ed class in the College of Adult and Professional Studies. It is a class that is made up of individuals who are trying to either generate enough credits to move from the AA degree into a degree completion program, and or they are in the leadership minor, because this is a course that is in the organizational leadership minor. So in this class, this is the fourth week now of a 5-week course, so the students do know each other quite well. Again, it's a smaller class. There's been a lot of interaction along the way. We'll see what happens in class tonight. The topic for the evening, as we're thinking about the whole realm of leadership, is it's very difficult to talk about leadership without talking about followership. And so the whole evening is given to the topic of followership styles, and values, and how values play into how we both lead and follow, really how we live our lives. So we'll go from there. Think beyond your workplace, think within your family, within the church, within your community, the different places that you follow. And write down what kind of write that place down in the part of the grid that demonstrates the kind of follower you are there. Okay, so I'll just give you a minute or two to do that. You look at that and you go, yeah, that's how I'm following, and you know what? I'm good to go with that. I like that. I'm satisfied with the way I follow in this particular situation. Go ahead, just like when you were in kindergarten, put a little smiley face beside that. That's telling you, that, yeah, this is okay. But if you're looking at where you're following and maybe you're not, kind of like what our discussion was before break, whereas we're not necessarily excited about it, maybe we'd like to change that, put, a sad face there. And then the challenge becomes, am I willing to settle with this style of following? Is it making a difference? Am I impacting? Am I... Remember our definition about wanting both the organization and the leader to succeed. Is that happening with me as the follower there, especially if I'm not satisfied with my style of followership? So go ahead and work on that for a second. Anybody come up with happy faces? You've recognized where you're following. You're going, yeah, I'm making a difference, or I'm happy with that. Not really.
Church. If I'm volunteering, then I'm doing it in church.
Okay.
I don't really necessarily have to lead, but I give ideas, I think, and then if there's different ideas, I'm like, okay, that's fine. My goal is just to help people and to get out there. So I'm okay being, it's not about me.
Okay.
It's about helping them, so I'm okay with that bigger picture.
Okay. Good, thanks. Sarah?
Let's see, I put a frown next to alienated following in my work, and then I just made note that I need to learn how to better communicate to maybe get out of that box of alienation. And then I put sometimes I'm a sheep, and examples would be like if I'm looking for life advice from my elders, or in school, I'll act as a sheep because I'm looking for guidance.
And so then that's a good place.
Yes, yes. I put a smiley face next to that.
I keep finding myself, I find myself in all of these situations, in all 4 of these categories, and I put a happy face on home, on the star follower, but then I put a sad face on home as a sheep follower, because at home, like your husband and my husband is kind of the same way. He want to do what he want to do, and he wants me to want to do what he wants to do as well. And all the time, I don't be wanting to do what he wants to do. So that's when I'm at home and I'm a sheep follower, and I'm not happy with that, because I feel like I'm being bullied and intimidated to do what he wants. And it's not like he's just like, you're going to do it, you're going to do it. He's like, we're going to play, you're going to play with it, and you're going to participate, okay, Rosemary? Or we're going to watch this movie. And I'm like, I don't really want to, but if you want to, okay. To keep the peace, and like I was saying to you, kind of choose my battles. And then the star follower, I put a happy face at home because I'm like, for real, he does what I say. You know, for real, he does what I say in the house, and everyone that comes across my threshold, they do what I say, and I'm not. And so, if you come in the house, you have to follow my rules, and I only go so far with him, and then he know I could give him a look, or I could say okay or whatever. When I say those type of words, he knows that he needs to back off.
And you made a good distinction of how in one place we can be both. Because when you're talking about home, you could be both, you know, the star follower and that's effective kind of following. And I can also be, you know, way in the background and not really caring. So that ability, that reality that we can be, just like when we were talking about leadership styles, that we lead, you know, we can lead in one situation from multiple styles of leadership. We can follow in different ways as well. So.
And it's okay to follow. Like you said, it's not being weak to follow. Do you know what I mean? And that's something that I've progressively learned. People have told me I have a servant's heart, so I like to serve. I think of that as following.
Right.
I love it. And I'm okay, and I do it effectively, and I'm okay doing it. And that doesn't mean I'm less than because you're leading and I'm following.
I don't know who said the quote. I've heard several people tune to the quote, so I don't say a name anymore. But, you know, that reality that if you think you're a leader, you know, turn around and see if anybody's following. Because if they're not, you're just out taking a walk. You know, so I think that reality of that really does give a lot of power to the follower as well.
We lead as we follow. Because, I mean, if you know, talk about from the first week that we had, pretty much the first 20 minutes, you know, if a leader defined is one who influences others. And so as followers, we're always influencing, whether we acknowledge that or not. And so, absolutely, you know, being in the mirror, you know, to use my example, is influencing. So I think you're very influential if you're a star follower and you're.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, we're going to turn the corner just a little bit. We're going to stay on this topic of followership, but we're going to talk about it based upon research that has been done. There's two gentlemen by the name of Jim Kouzes and Barry Posner who, in the last decade, did global research on, yeah, it's a bright sheet to keep you awake. It's that time of night. If your caffeine's not working, then the color will, okay? You know, and here's the deal. They did a global study, went to 6 different countries, and this is the question they asked. The question was, what do you most admire in your leaders? What are you looking for in your leaders? Well, out of all of that, and it was across generations, you know, across cultures, based upon that question and that research, at the top of this page are the 20 different characteristics that they ended up, that people identified. You know, and again, around the world, this is what people are saying. This is what I'm looking for in my leaders. Here's what we're going to do. From this point on, we are an organization, okay? And you guys are all members of the organization, and I'm the president. I always wanted to be this president of an organization, okay? Here's the deal, though. What I really want to know, I am new to the organization, and I want to know how best to lead you effectively. So the reality for me is I don't have opportunity necessarily to meet with all of you, but who you are is you represent the departments and the divisions that are a bigger piece of what our organization is. And so as I'm trying to figure out how do I best lead, you know, what are people expecting? You know, what's the culture like here? What is the anticipation? How do I best lead to that? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put you into groups of 2 right now. So Julie and Marlena, you will be a division. Okay, Vivian and Sarah, you will be a division, and Rose and Brian, you are a division, okay? I want you to work together based upon the same 20 because now I need to figure out, again, I don't have time or, there isn't time because we're in a kind of crunch here. I'm going to talk to one of you, so I need to talk to the leader of your team. Okay, let's pull the discussion back together. Let's find out. Okay, our leader here was Marlena. Okay, Marlena, how can I best serve what are you guys looking for in your department?
We need someone who's going to be honest and supportive, but yet inspire us when you have to be courageous and believe in what we're doing.
Wow. So honest and supportive.
And inspiring and courageous.
Inspired and encouraged?
Yeah, courageous.
Oh, courageous. I'm sorry. Okay, now you guys got done really fast. So you must be a pretty tight team. How did you come up? Was it hard to come up with these four? How did you?
We're go-getters, and we want you to just believe in us and know that we're going to do the best we can for you. But in the same sense, you have to support us.
Yeah. Yeah. This is kind of a high energy team. You know, those words tell me that, you know, we're not going to spend a lot of time talking, thinking. We're going to make some quick decisions. We're going to move. Okay? Interesting. Okay, good. Thanks.
Or a leader that is caring, and that would be passionate and listen to us. That all goes to caring.
Yeah, we got Vivian's passion in there.
Yep.
Okay.
And then we're also looking for an honest leader because we want someone we can trust and
Okay.
someone who shows us integrity. Inspiring because we want to be led positively, upbeat spirits, and have vision and futures to work towards. And then we also chose confident because we want to feel like we're being led and that we're also given resources to improve ourselves.
It goes along with the inspiring, but I think it's more toward the leader yourself.
Yeah.
We want, the inspiring is you to us.
That's right.
The forward-looking is you
Yeah.
in your ability to lead.
Yeah. Well, remember that first night when we talked about hallmarks of effective leaders? The leaders provide,
Choose
number
a
one thing,
direction.
provide direction. So that would be what that's about. Okay, good. Well, you know, this gives me insight, and this just gives you a little idea of how you would lead a team, individuals, no matter how big or how little. Can you really get beneath to figure out what people are looking for? You know, the reality, if we really were an organization, you know, what you tell me here is every team's a little bit different, and yet, look, there's pretty strong commonalities. Out of the 3 divisions that are represented here, every single one is looking for somebody that's honest, true to your word, willing to follow through. You can count on me, dependable along the way. Inspiring, every single team asks for that same thing. Research was also done by the same gentleman, and what are we looking for in other followers, in our teammates, in the people that we live life with on a daily basis? What does that look like? So we're going to do the same kind of format. Okay? Take it, it's the same words at the top. Go ahead for yourself. When you think about your colleagues, the people that you work with on a daily basis, what are you hoping for from them? Okay, what are you looking for? What are you expecting from them? So go ahead and take a couple minutes and choose those.
I like chai tea.
Chai tea is spicy or
Dependable,
Try that.
automatic.
We got a little big full.
Karen, but we want confident. If we
Oh, it don't.
Let's go with competence.
Are you guys set?
Yep.
Okay, let's find out then what you're looking for in each other. Let's start with Ryan and Rose.
Okay, we have honesty for the first one, because I need anyone that I'm working with to be honest with me, because I don't like surprises. And Brian as well, he wants people to be honest. And then the second one is cooperative. I need people around me to be cooperative with me as I would be with them, to make sure that we make good, sound decisions. And dependable for us is, okay, we're together. I need to be able to depend on you, because without being able to depend on you, I can't cooperate with you, because without cooperation, there's no dependability.
Honest, dependable, cooperative, confident.
Okay, hold on. Honest, dependable,
Cooperative.
Confident
and cooperative.
You have cooperative.
Oh, I have it up there. I do. There you go. All right. Wow. So this group, all three, you know, that's what you're across the board. So this organization is looking for people who are honest. You're true to your word. You tell the truth. You stick to what you have to say. Cooperative. We are able to collaborate and work together to coordinate our efforts to get to what we need to do. And you know what? I need to be able to count on you. Mm-hmm. You know, you need to be dependable. So that's what you are saying. And then we ended up with, I don't know why I put that there. Anyway, and then a few other things along the way. Well, you guys are the research. I mean, literally, the research said you are in this row. Honest, cooperative, dependable, and competent. Those were the top 4 in the research. Again, global research. So it hasn't changed, depending upon whether we're sitting in a classroom in St. Paul, Minnesota, or, you're sitting around the world with
Given this list of words.
Given this list of words, and given the meaning of, might be here. What's also interesting is maybe the meanings, the definitions of words, how we would define them might be a little bit different than before. But basically what they ended up doing is taking all of that research and then developing these words, to fit what the open-ended definitions that they were given. So that brings me to that point. We've been talking about me as the follower, and when we talked about, there are 2 parts to tonight. One is me as the follower, so I've been trying to help you identify where you're at in that process, both on Kelly's grids as well as within all the research. Now what I want to introduce us to is me as a leader of followers. Again, recognizing that, do I really know the people that I'm following, that are following me, and recognizing that. And I want to introduce you to a man by the name of Dr. Noel Tichy. Noel Tichy is a professor at the University of Michigan. Before he was at University of Michigan, he was at Columbia University. He has done a ton of study on research. He's got some global research institutes that he's worked with, written several books. One of the books that he's written is The Leadership Engine. And I remember years ago when somebody showed me that book, I thought, oh, good book, I'll pick it up, I'll read it. And when I got the book, it's about this thick, and there were no pictures. Wow. And as I got into it, kind of dry, and I remember kind of paging my way through it and then kind of setting it aside, never thinking about it a whole lot. And then I heard Noel Tichy at a conference speak. And I remember going home and looking at the book going, is this really the same person? He was so engaging, and I learned so much in an hour session that he was in. And his thesis of that book, and that became alive to me as I was watching the conference, was he said, any time that we are leading, we are teaching. And that when we are teaching, we have to have a teachable point of view. And if we don't understand what that is, or we can't identify what that is, it probably will impact the effectiveness of our leading.
You say leading is teaching with an understandable point of view?
With a teachable point of view.
With a teachable point of view.
So rather than me telling you what he had to say, I'm going to let you listen to that conference session, just like 5 minutes of it, of what he had to say. This is a ministry conference, so he's speaking to a group of pastors, or to ministry leaders. So think broader, because he comes out of the education world as well. And he gives lots of examples. He's done a lot of work with GE and in the corporate world as well. But listen to what he has to say. And he says, and I think, is that on your blue sheet?
And then there are maybe 200 or 300 volunteers in the church who need to be influenced and shaped by those leaders. What would you tell those 5 leaders to do to try to develop like those volunteers and other leaders in the church?
The first thing I think you have to do is take on the mindset that as a leader, one of your major responsibilities is also to be a teacher and to develop other people. And if you buy that, then you are faced with the question, well, what do you teach them? That's what I call, you better have a teachable point of view. I give people often the metaphor of being a tennis coach. I can be a great tennis player and not be a good coach. At some point, if I want to be a coach, I now got to think about how do I teach the backhand and the forehand? What are the values I want as a coach? People have to come on time, dress a certain way. I don't want you...
Well, Tuesday night's class was an interesting night. We didn't have a full class. It was bad weather night, so we had a couple people driving in from out state, so we were missing their presence. And so I honestly was wondering what would happen because they're quite interactive. But what I saw happen is a couple of the other people really stepped up to the plate then because the more dominant, folks weren't there. So maybe that was, a good thing. That's a question later, but that is kind of what happened. There were 2 things going on in class that night, at least in the film part of it. The first part, the students were responding and reacting to what they had already read for class. They had read a chapter in the Daft book on the leadership experience on followership. And the one thing I have, one of the things I do, I always tell students I'm not going to regurgitate what they've already read unless I think it's really important, and then I'll try to bring it to life for them. And that's what we did. We took Kelly's followership styles. I created, the grid that they were working from, and then we talked about all the different styles, but then the point of application was, how does this impact you? Think of all the places that you are following, and what kind of a follower are you? Are you proud of that? What would you do? Would you do anything differently? Would you not do anything differently? So it's not just reading the chapter or writing a summary about it. It's like, no, how does this impact me? And then they were looking at the people that they lead and really identifying, can they put them in a category? What does that look like? Why would they be in that category? How does that spur the kind of conversation that they need to have with those individuals if they want to bring them to that, that ideal, of an effective follower? And are they ready for that? Are they willing to be challenged? Are they willing to be held accountable? Are they willing to listen to other people's perspectives and opinions? So that's what we were doing with the first part. The second part is I was having them respond to research that had been done. Some research that had been done about 15 years ago on what global research, that what people are looking for, what they admire in their leaders. But then there's also very current research from the last couple of years that really does parallel what was found, 15 years ago. But again, rather than just reading about that research, it's like, well, how would you answer that question if you had been a research participant or subject? And what we found interesting the other night was they ended up with the same 4 top characteristics that happened 15 years ago in research. So it brings that validity of the research forward, that tonight, in 2010, we're still thinking the same things or looking for the same things. So I think those are the things that worked well, was watching that, and then they were also supposed to look at each other and think, what would I want in my teammates, in my colleagues as well. You never know when you open up the door, of opportunity and conversation. Some classes that will be shut down faster. This happened to be a very talkative group. It also, the one thing I've learned, it depends upon the generation. If I do that same kind of exercise with CAS students, they don't have the context for it. So while they will play along with me, if you will, it's much shorter, much more succinct, and we have to describe, many times define what the words are, rather than allowing the student to maybe define the way they, want it. I think, I don't know if it got captured on the clip, but one of the students in class on Tuesday night said, yes, we ended up with the same 4 based upon the choices we were given. And so that was an interesting observation as well, which I was reading between the lines saying, these might not be my 4 top choices, but this is what you gave me to work with. So those are the things I think worked well. At the end of the class, we did takeaways. I always have them do that. What about tonight are you going to take with you further? And that's where they moved beyond some of the more personal kind of things they've been talking about into their professional context, into, I would categorize myself as alienated, but I don't really want to be here. And one student in the class even there was a very tender, kind of a gut-wrenching moment when this particular individual said, I've realized through all of this that in my marriage, my spouse is the alienated follower. But now putting the whole thing into context tonight, and even thinking about the idea, Tishy's ideas of, what am I teaching or how am I interfacing, what kind of ideas and, energy am I bringing into this? The individual said, I am as much to blame for my spouse being the alienated follower the comment was made, I have a long drive home tonight, and I'm going to be framing my conversation, for this week. So that, and then there was another individual in class that piggybacked on that and said, I was thinking the same thing, but I was too afraid to say that, but you have verbalized what I know I need to do as well. So there were those, many times I think we are preparing people for their professional realms, which we are, their venues. So much of what we do really has, if they're being authentic with themselves, that personal place of connection. So I think that's what worked well, that night. What didn't work well with that particular group, there are always things that don't work well with that group. I was very pleased. It went much longer than I thought, and I had another whole segment that we were going to do that night in class that we never ever got to, that I think fits really well with it, kind of puts the exclamation mark on what we were doing. And so I was a little disappointed we didn't get to that, But on the other hand, they don't know that. So I just left it at that for the evening. This is a really critical question, and I think this is the one that, as I have done a lot of soul searching and how I would best answer this question too, I realize that so much of what happens here happens before the course or the class ever starts. It's my attitude towards the class, it's the investment that I give to it, the importance that I think that it has, the time and the initiative that I take to get to know the students even ahead of time, you know, the kind of interaction I have with them, whether that's through Blackboard or Moodle or through phone conversations or emails that I send out to them, even the attitude of, I've learned to tell them, especially if it's a course, that I teach a lot of the first courses in programs, and I know people are very apprehensive, you know, about coming to school, and so just kind of setting stages, and I see myself more as like a director, setting the stage, you know, for them. You know, here's where your classroom is, and when you walk in, the person with a smile on their face waiting to meet you will be me. You know, so then with that is, and I've realized I do teach my classes and lead my classes through the lens of leadership. You know, when students come, I am there before them. I get there 30 to 45 minutes ahead of time, get things set up, make sure the room is set the way I want, make sure that technology is working. I generally have a CD playing in the background, even like the other night, you know, I had Christmas music playing, and then, you know, they walk in and go, oh, it's Christmas. And it happened to be snowing that night, too. So, you know, that was the good news, bad news, but it set the stage. The reality of that is you watch people walk in, you see the demeanor that they have, whether they're bouncing in or they're dragging in, you know, whether they just sit down and kind of drop into the seat and never bother to take their coats and hats off, or if they're all set to go and they want to go get coffee or whatever it is. And then the discussion, it's following up, and it's intentional. You know, remembering what kind of conversations we had the week before or what I read. I jot notes on just my paper that I have up front that they don't see, of something I've read that always gives me a piece of contact with them that I can immediately start a conversation with them. Or like one young woman, I know her mother just had cancer surgery, and we've been praying for her, but just following up. I know it's been draining for her. How are you doing? I know you're concerned about your mom. How are you doing? And as they each walk in then, it's interesting to watch them, because they don't just come and sit in isolation. It's like, what are you guys talking about? You know, or they start engaging. So by the time class actually starts, what I've seen is, I don't have to think about, are we going to have discussion tonight? It's generally, okay, you guys, we got to change the focus of our conversation here and move towards, you know, what the topic is at hand, and then setting that stage, you know, for what the topic is. So I think that I've learned that. I didn't know that at the beginning, you know, and I am more reserved as well, so that is not always my favorite thing, you know, to be the only person in the classroom with them at the beginning, but I've learned how I can prompt myself, and it is the piece, a lot of times I will have introverts say to me, well, you're so extroverted that no wonder you like leadership and no wonder you like, you know, being up in front. That is not my nature. I've learned to do that, and so I always, you know, I'm able to come back and say, you know, it is possible to prompt yourself and prepare yourself. And then I think I also tell the students, and I do this too with God, I claim the classroom for Christ. And I do that before the class starts, and I do that in their presence. It really is that prayer of invocation when the course starts, of inviting God into our presence, recognizing that life is going to happen. It already is, and it's going to continue to happen in this class. We don't have to do this alone, and Satan would like nothing better than to destroy what we're doing, or to pull them out of their academic journey, or to let them give up on what they're doing or give up on themselves. And so to set that, and obviously we don't have students who are all Christ followers, but I think it's another way to model for them what it is that we do believe, and believe wholeheartedly. And it has offered, and they're not always positive conversations, you know, as you all know, you know, out of those kind of things, but it's another way to model our Christian liberal arts background as well. Yes. I used to think that it was the reluctant learner that was the harder person. And now, especially when you set up a class that's geared toward discussion, you know, conversation, discussion, and dialogue, if you get that communicator, that talker going, it's hard to pull them, you know, back in. So that is always my challenge. And I don't know that I do that well all the time. The reluctant learner, it's watching. It's intentionally watching and listening. And again, it's remembering what they have written, maybe before that cue prompts in my mind, and watching their nonverbals. If, like in class the other night, there is one young woman in there that is very quiet, not sure what she wants to major in. This was a general studies course that you all watched, and that was an elective, and so she's still trying to determine what she wants to do as a major. And so she's been very skeptical about even thinking about leadership for herself. And so to watch her, and she watch her facials, the quizzical look on her face, and so that reality with many reluctant learners like that is paying attention to them and maybe fostering okay, Sarah, I've been watching, what are you thinking? There's something going on inside there. So you're acknowledging that that they're thinking. And what I've learned too is once that's acknowledged, that isn't necessarily cold calling like, let's just start, but I've been watching you, you've been hearing what's going on, I know there's something you want to say. I think people feel valued that way. I've rarely had a person say, I don't want to say anything. It's like, oh, I have a place to jump in, let me tell you about what I'm talking about. And then recognizing, generally in a first night of class, I will lay out for the students, and communication profs all know this, the different kinds of communication styles that are there. And that there will always be somebody that will be those reticent observers, that something is going on, and I'll probably try to draw that out in several ways. Some of you are going to want to talk all the time. You're the external processors. I may at some point say, thanks for that input, now let's hear from somebody else. Some people will want to facilitate. You'll want to take my spot, and do that. And that's okay. We'll do that together. Some people are going to be totally bored, and you're going to let us know in every way, shape, or form that you are. And we may take a break at that point, and you and I might have a little conversation, along the way, because I don't want to waste your time, and I don't want to waste our time. And, some will be challenging everything we say and do, and that's okay as long as that's done under the umbrella, of respect. So I generally start every course with that little intro, and I think that helps people, and every once in a while we'll come back. Now this class we didn't have to ever come back to that, but it helps set that. And then even most of my classes I have take the Strengths Finder right away as well. That for me, I'm a strengths coach, and it gives me insight. It's always for their process of self-discovery, but I also know then too who are going to be those people that will command kind of that attention, and who will be those deliberatives, or the people that stand back, that they're waiting for the right answer or the right time, and so then pulling them in. I never do anything the same way. There, in a 4, 5, 6 week course, no night, or even in my CAS classes, no 2 periods are alike. And so students don't know what to expect. They don't know, they can't say, oh, I can be 5 minutes late because she's going to do this, or, I could leave 15 minutes early because I know we're just going to be doing, they don't know. So it's, I've worked hard to capture their attention and to leave them dangling. Now, I know that's not everybody's style, but for me, and some students don't like that because they do want to know, but as they get to know me, then it's almost like the, that kind of that mystique or the mystery of, oh, well, I wonder what's going to happen next. So we don't even take break at the same time generally. We'll figure that out, and I don't necessarily tell them. I will always tell them at the head of the at the beginning of class what our focus is for the night. But I rarely, if ever, I invite them onto the train with me, but I rarely, if ever, tell them, the journey that we're going to take or the scenery that they're going to see along the way. Just always remind them that, we'll be, hopefully in that amount of time, all the learning styles will be touched. Again, it goes back to Parker Palmer, inviting people to dance, inviting the student to dance, and, the music changes, and sometimes you're going to like it, and you're going to, your body's going to move, and sometimes you're going to go, what on earth? And I can't remember if I said this last time, but I literally had a student, a couple of years ago in one of the CAS classes when I invited them for the semester to dance with me, and listen to the music, that I didn't want any wallflowers, I was going to bring them out to dance with me. And on the evaluation, this student wrote at the end of the semester, I almost dropped this class because I hate to dance. And when Mrs. Daniels invited me to dance, I didn't want to. So I think that's the thing of capturing, doing whatever it takes to capture their attention, thinking out. We're always encouraging our students to think outside of the box. I think, to offer that kind of suggestion means I need to do that as well. And so look for those methods and those modes of being creative. With a small class and in a facilitating discussion, I think what first happens, it happens in the mind of the student. When they walk into a class and it's a small class, they have a choice to stay or to flee, at that point in time. And if they choose to stay, they pretty much are guaranteed, and they know they're going to have to participate. So they've already made their own choice. So there should be no surprises that they're going to be part of what goes on, all evening, or all, for those 4 hours, whenever that's happening on a day or a weekend or whatever. A larger class, I think for people who think, oh, what a breeze, or I can sit back, or I don't have to do anything, get a little surprised in class too, because even if there are 10, 15, or 30 plus, like I have in the CAS class, then you break them up into small groups, and so rather than doing, I might set the stage, break them into small groups, let them work within the groups. I randomly assign leaders so they never know what their role is going to be. It might be somebody whose birthday is closest to today, or the person that stayed up the latest because I want them to be engaged, or the person with the most first cousins. They never know what that's going to be, so generally, they, somewhere along the line, they're going to get to be the leader of their group. And then, from my part, it is paying attention again, observing, if especially with a larger class, how, walking around. I don't ever sit down. I'm moving all the time, but listening, watching, observing. And if I still see that somebody is quite reticent, or there's somebody talking all the time, and they're also the leader for whatever, and they're kind of dominating, then I will turn the tables again. And when the report comes back to the class, or we blend back together as a class, I'll change it, and it's the person who, who stayed up got up the earliest, or whatever it is, so the same person isn't reporting back. So it generates interactive learning. They have to pay attention because they're not quite sure if they're going to have to speak or not. So that randomness with the large groups seems to work pretty well. And with those small groups, I think it really comes back to the mindset. And we have watched, good or bad, a couple people drop from smaller courses or smaller cohorts for that very reason. They don't want to be the focal point. I think, the how and the why, I would start with the why. And it forces the student to be the active participant. Again, they don't get to just sit there and kind of glaze over. And the writing prompts are for me. To keep me somewhat focused as well. If I have handed somebody a sheet, then we better be able to figure out what's on that sheet rather than, going off on tangents or rabbit trails. And yet it's not a PowerPoint. And PowerPoints are wonderful for some people. I've learned in my teaching style, they're not wonderful because I lose my spot in them, because I tend to go with the flow of the conversation or the dialogue. And in light of that, we might not ever get back to where the PowerPoint is. So that's the why, for me. I don't want passive learners. That's the biggest reason. I think it also demonstrates to them, and I tell them in the first show, that I'm not, they're not paying a high price for a one-person show. I'm not their entertainment for the next 4 or 5 weeks. That this is one of those interactive, kind of impromptu kind of shows that they're coming to. And it sets, I think, the actual piece of paper in front of them sets, or whatever it is, a graphic, or if it's a puzzle or whatever it is, sets in front of them a point of expectation. And again, intrigue, what are we going to do with this? How do I take this home? Some students sometimes don't want to write on those because they'll on their piece of paper, because it's like, well, could I use this at work tomorrow, whatever. So I always bring extras, so that, because I want them to write on those pieces of paper. I want them to own that. And then I always bring extras if they want to utilize something later at work, or in a church small group or wherever they at. I think it creates that takeaway as a resource. It's like, if we can do this here, you know what, you could do this same exercise, somewhere else. So then they have a tangible, to take with them. And if they don't, I don't know about you, but sometimes I can sit for 4 hours and go home and it's like, what did we do all night? Well, if I can pull out of my bag, oh yeah, this is what we talked about, it gives me that. Even if they're writing, or a class that's later, they have something to build upon, that application. And then the how. Some of those sheets of paper are simulations that I just end up creating, out of like the other night, out of the research that was given. It's like, well, how do we teach this research to make it alive? So based upon what I knew the research was, then I just create, I don't consider myself a creative person. I don't draw. I'm not good with flower arranging. I'm not, I can't create beautiful aesthetics. But I've realized that God created me in a way with a brain that thinks, how do I bring something alive? And so that's what I end up doing, with simulations, with pieces of paper, or many times if I'm reading a textbook and I get lost in that, I'm diagramming for myself what it's saying. Well, then I just share those diagrams, with the student. This is what, it was. And so one of those sheets the other night was something like that. Basically straight out of the textbook, just this is what it really looks like, not just the words on the page. As I thought about this question, I realized I wrote down these words, that again, if our goal is interactive, transformative learning, that we want from our students, the onus is on me again to set the stage, so basically I set it up and then I invite the students to play the game, along the way with me. So I always expect discussion. They know that, from the minute they walk in the classroom, no matter what class it is, what program I'm teaching in. And I will always have my content notes with me, but I'm not tied to my content notes. And even if it's new content, I practice and read and until I own it. So I'm not standing with my notes in hand all the time, but I will refer to them if, depending, especially if we get off on, a tangent or whatever. But then I will come back to them sometimes at the end of a discussion or even in the midst to be able to compare and contrast of maybe where I had been thinking we would go and where they've, obviously gone. And many times I will just say to them, okay, well, let's see, is there anything else we need to cover? Many times it's a point of affirmation because you get to say, you know what, I don't have anything else really to add. You guys have covered everything here. Or here's one or two more points I just want you to drop into what we've been thinking about, how you might expand that. Well, I am still growing. I've come a long way, and yet there's a long way to go. Kind of the irony of this is when I was doing my undergraduate work, all of my friends were education majors, and at that point in time, I had no desire to teach. I couldn't quite figure out why they were choosing to do that. And so I was a sociology social work major, which I absolutely loved, and I learned through that process how much I love people. And then moved into my graduate work years later, but, in the whole area of leadership, but realized my life has been teaching. And so when given the opportunity to expand, my professional life into teaching, especially in CAS and CAPS-GS, I had a starting point and some great words of wisdom that were shared to me, it's trial and error, in the sense of you learn what works and try to figure out how to replicate that, never the same way. I mean, that definition of insanity, doing the same thing same way twice and expecting something different. But then the reality of being willing to risk and throw away that, what doesn't work, and that comes from listening, from observing, from extending grace and being, that grace given back then, by students. And a veteran, prof a few years ago said to me, the other thing, Nikki, he said, you understand leadership. He said, recognize that your classroom is your organization. It is your place of business, and you are the CEO or the president, whatever position you want to hold, and you will lead those students the way you would lead that team. How will you do that? And, when he said that to me at that point in time, it's like that trigger went off, and I thought, well, it is. It's a different team. It's a different team that I'm leading. It isn't we don't get the pleasure of hanging with them for the long haul, but for those 4, 5, 6, and or 16 weeks, we have them for that short amount of time. And so that collection of individuals, it's not random, it's not haphazard. God knew they were going to be in there. He's given me that pleasure and responsibility to help move them, generating with this question, how have I grown? When I'm challenging a student to grow, I know I'm growing as well. So I come away from every experience knowing just a little bit more. And again, it changes depending upon the generations. Obviously CAPS-GS students come in with a different frame of mind, and they're ready to engage usually and challenge. CAS students don't always know that. Some are here because they really want to be here. Some are here because their parents still want them here. And so it's trying to get into their mindset and meeting them at that point of need. As a social worker, I was always taught, find that point of felt need. Well, the same is in the classroom. I'm looking for those points of felt need with those students, and recognizing there's a difference, too, in what you're teaching. If you're teaching a core course that a student has to take to graduate, they come with a different frame of mind than a student who comes in an elective class, and they're there because they want to take this class. It's either intrigue or interest. And they come in a little bit differently too. And so I've learned in my own mind to remember what I'm teaching. Am I teaching a core course, or am I teaching an elective that they're choosing to take? Because that helps in my preparation. I move around a lot, and like we all know, we find our points that generate that confidence in us, that piece of self-assurance. I love Rosabeth Cantor, who wrote the book Confidence, says that confidence is that sweet spot between arrogance and despair. And I think that becomes the continuum I would like, I'm looking for that sweet spot all the time.